Hello, and welcome to the Kronos Upgrade presentation for timekeepers and managers. This presentation is part of our process improvement that we've been working on. We've already begun some of these elements, and we're going to continue working on these process improvements throughout the coming month or two. As you'll notice, we've already done some of these items. We've given departments an extended time period to get the time cards entered correctly, and so that deadline is now midnight on Pay Monday. We've also already given all employees access to view their own time card and accruals using something called a PC View license within Kronos. Employees should be using that now and not using the My Time Detail link that is on the Kronos page. As we go forward, we're also going to be getting into an employee approval of the time card, and thus just again getting us to that point where the employees are held accountable for the time card. Employees are encouraged to be looking at their time card every day to make sure that all of the entries are on and are correct. We're also bringing on a new phone system. Our current phone system is going to be retired, and this new phone system will come up simultaneous with the upgraded Kronos. So the new features that we are going to have, the teletime is the new phone system, and the timekeepers and managers will have a new view in Kronos called the Navigator view. Currently, we all have the classic view, and when we do the upgrade, employees will keep that classic view, but managers and timekeepers will have the new Navigator view. One of the new elements is the GTOR, that stands for Global Time Off Request, and it is a bit of a mouthful, and so we've already adopted the acronym GTOR. We have a little bit on the FMLA leave editor. We're familiar with that. That will work the very same way, but we will have a couple of slides regarding FML and how that's requested and how that looks on the time card. We have just a minor change on the historical edits, and so that's just one slide, as you can see. We do have some improvement to the reports, and so that's some good news there for people that are using the reports within Kronos. As timekeepers, you should be already familiar with the My Information tab that you have, and that's where you look at your time, where you look at your time card, your accruals, and so on. And when we go forward with the upgrade, you will still have a section called My Information, where you will also make your requests for time off and so on. We're simply moving that, or Kronos has moved that to a slightly different location, so we'll want to make sure that we know where that's located. The go live is March 18th. That means we're taking the system down March 18th around 8:15 in the morning. That time will be announced as we get closer to that date. The system will come down, and then later that day, then it will come back up as the new Kronos. Of course, we need to know who to call. What if we do have a question or a problem? And then we'll do a brief demonstration of the system. And if you do have questions after this presentation, the last slide does give you some information where you could send any questions that you might have after you watch this presentation. So Teletime is the name of this new phone system. And again, we're going to call into the very same phone number. So whether your folks call into the 23333 or 33333 or some other number that is already a Kronos number that you can call into, you will do the same thing. No changes to the numbers that you call into. It's simply the codes that you will enter into that phone. We're going to be looking at that Navigator view in detail. And again, the employees will retain the classic view. Global time off, again, that's where we're going to spend a lot of time today in this presentation, is looking at that global time off request process. All requests in the future will be made in Kronos. We currently have 12 different systems at UTMB for requesting leave and time adjustments, and all items in the future will be requested within Kronos. We do have some information on the new Java. Anytime we have an upgrade in Kronos, that means, of course, that we have an upgrade to Java. So benefits, there's benefits to departments, to the organization, to employees. All of these benefits are streamlining, increased accuracy, and that's where our goal is headed. Again, increased accuracy, one system. That means that our records retention is much better. It's one system that we have for recording all of those requests, and it is streamlined for the approval of leave. That's a really good feature for us, and it's going to increase, again, the accuracy of the time card. Because we will have two separate views, that the employees keep the classic view and the timekeeper managers have the navigator view, that means that there will be two distinct logins. So whereas now we have a single login on the Kronos page, you will see the two separate logins. Also, there's a new link. We're taking away the functionality of the current link that timekeepers have on the Kronos page for the historical edit form, and this will become the employee historical edit request form. Timekeepers will then always use that link on the inside under My Links within Kronos. So this becomes the employee historical edit request form. That is because within Kronos, within GTOR, Kronos does not allow the employee to submit a request on a time period that has already been signed off and is in the processing or has already been processed. So if there is no way within Kronos GTOR to submit that request, we do have to have a way to do that. Again, we're trying to minimize the number of historical requests that are processed. We currently, as an institution, process over 1,000 every single month. That number needs to come down, and so all of this streamlining, all of this increased accuracy, employee accountability is going to get us to that decreased number of historical edits. But they do happen. There are situations, so we have to have a method for that. So all historical edits will be requested by employees on this particular form. The employee will fill out the form and then send that to their manager. The manager can review it, make the edits in the true historical edit form that the timekeepers have, or route that over to their timekeeper if there's a centralized process for that department. So again, the code, the numbers that we call into, the numbers 23333 or so on, those remain the same. But the codes that we will use will change. And we can see our list of common codes that we would be using right here. And we will have a true phone reference guide posted very soon on the My Training page. And then, of course, it will also eventually be posted on the payroll page, replacing the current phone reference guide. As you can see, it's fewer codes. If you have individuals in your department that currently clock with a 1 and a 9, in the future they will clock with a 1, and then at the end of the day with a 1. If you have individuals that currently clock with a 1, a 3, and 4 across the lunch hour, and then a 9 at the end of the day, in the future those folks would use a 1 to clock in at the beginning of their shift, a 5 to go to lunch and cancel that default meal break, a 1 to return from lunch, and then a 1 at the end of the day. So all clocking, standard clocking becomes a 1, and the 5 is the go to lunch, cancel my default meal. If you have individuals that do float by phone, that can still be done. The code changes. Now 2 is the float to, that's floating to a department, floating to a position, and so on. If you have individuals that are on call and they have a process where they currently dial into the phone now and they do a callback code, they will still do that by phone, but it will be a new code. The new callback will be a 3. And then those prompts will go through just as they do today, asking the employee to enter the appropriate information. The 4 is not utilized in the new phone system. And again, the 5 is designed as the cancel meal, go to lunch identifier. There is a nice feature in this new one. If you happen to be in a centralized area where a lot of employees are sharing one phone and there's a line at that phone at the beginning and the end of each shift to record the time over the clocking system, the 0 will help that process go faster. Instead of hanging up the phone, picking up the phone, dialing again, the first person in line can simply listen to those prompts, make their entry, and then press 0 to log out of the call. Hand the phone to the next person, and they will begin the prompts again. Welcome to Kronos, the time is, and so on. Finish their call, press the 0 to log out, hand the phone to the next person. It simply saves some time if you do have one of those centralized situations where there's one phone serving several folks. Hanging up the phone, in essence, does log you out. These new clocks, because it is a 1 and it's not identifying specifically that it is a clock in versus a clock out, those punches will go to the time card sequentially. If someone fails to clock at the beginning of their shift, the next first punch that is seen goes into the first cell. So it just slides into the first available cell, whether that's an in or out punch, is really not captured with these new phone clocks. So that we'll take some practice looking at the time card, and we have several screenshots of that. You may have noticed on that previous slide that there is not an equivalent to the current clock code 7. So our exempt folks that are clocking in currently with a clock code 7, they will in the future have a choice of one of two things. Those methods will need to be evaluated by departments and need to decide how you're going to handle that situation. Again, this is only for our exempt individuals currently clocking with a clock code 7. If the goal is to have hours worked populated by the individual, then that is what's called a PC edit license. Everyone currently has a PC view license. That's what gives us the access to look at the time card, look at our accruals, and so on. The PC edit license is something that can be given to exempt individuals. That means I will go in and I will enter directly onto my own time card hours worked, just like I would have done via the phone. I'll enter 9, 8, 8.5, whatever the situation is based upon that default meal. So then the employee again is entering this directly onto their time card, just as it would have looked had they used the phone using the 7. The other option for departments is something called pay to schedule. This is where the timekeeper takes some action. Again, it is very simple and very easy. It's not difficult, not time consuming. The timekeeper can put several people, again, they must be exempt, on a schedule. The schedule does not impact anything about how they work and what they do. It's simply a tool laying behind the scenes in Kronos. And if the person is an 8 to 5 typically, then we would put them on an 8 to 5 schedule. Every 4 weeks, the timekeeper then does a couple of clicks, and that person now, their time card is populated with to mirror that schedule that they had. So again, it would populate based upon action that the timekeeper does, and then the employees would never actually touch their time card. They would then process their leave requests, and the leave requests would seamlessly overwrite the day's pay to schedule that was listed. So pay to schedule is a really good feature in that it creates that seamless action, and a lot of our folks are already on that at UTMB. These are the only two choices that your department has to get time cards with some entries on them for individuals that are currently using the clock code 7. Clock code 7 people typically should not be using the hourly method of clocking in, so an exempt person should not be using a 1 unless they truly are accruing and identified that they are accruing comp time or overtime. And again, that process is the very same as it is for those folks now. They are typically clocking in to override their standard schedule. So if I am an hourly employee clocking in and out using the 1, we have an example here of the before and after. And you'll notice that in the current world, it is clearly identified with a red box if the in punch is the one that was missed. But in the new world going forward, due to the sequential punching, the 1119, which was actually the out punch, simply slid over into the first available square. So this makes it a little bit more confusing because the red box now shows as if it was the out punch that was missed. This is going to require a little bit more attention from both the employee and the timekeepers. Again, this is one of the situations where having that schedule loaded in Kronos behind the scenes could be a benefit to us, and we'll see another screenshot illustrating that. So the timekeeper view, again, this is just a view of what this will look like when you log in. And the next slide, slide 11, shows us with all of the identifiers on here. So notice that the timekeeping tab, that's considered a workspace. It's our default workspace. And notice that the My Genies are all there just as you would expect to see them. They're not hidden on a tab. They're right there front and center. There's all the same Genies that you currently have, and they work just the same as they do now. On the right-hand side, we have what are called secondary widgets. The My Genies is the default or primary widget, and these other ones are the secondary widgets. If I want to get to one of those, I need to bring that over into that primary workspace. So these three widgets are the ones that are tied to the timekeeping workspace. To get to one of those widgets, get them over into the main area, I can do a click and drag, or we can use the little gear, which is this symbol here, which we typically think of as being these settings, but that little gear is actually where we could find a pop-out, and it would immediately bring that widget into the primary space. We also have something called Under the Globe. It's just an arbitrary name that we've given it because it is under the globe. There's several important things that we do need to know what's over there. And we also have the workspace. That's where Kronos put the My Information. So we'll look at each one of these areas in more detail. So on the timekeeping workspace, we have our Genies, and we also have the little refresh button there. If you have wandered around in the Navigator view and you're new to it and you just want your Genies back, if you click that little recycle or refresh button, it will bring the My Genies back into your primary view. Again, when you're using the secondary widgets and you need to bring those over, you can click and drag that blue header bar for each of those over, or as we have illustrated in the bottom right, click on the gear and you'll see the pop-out, and it makes that zoom over and it is immediately accessible. Notice in this view for the request manager, that's where the requests for GTOR, all of the leave requests, the time off requests, the time adjustment requests, all of those requests are flowing to the request manager. All timekeepers that have access to that group of employees have access to the request manager for those employees. You can see that it is keeping track of how many requests are currently waiting for you. That's based upon your all home. So if you have multiple departments as a timekeeper, you will see the number of requests for all home. Once you get into the request manager, then you can slice and dice and ask for just a certain subgroup. If you wish to run a report, it is a link. You don't have to bring that widget over. You could simply click on the link directly to reports. And under the globe, looking at that in a little bit more detail, these are the items that you will have under the globe. If you are a scheduling timekeeper, if you are in Health Systems and you have the Advanced Scheduler, you may also see additional items under the globe. Noting through here, again, Schedule Editor, that's where I can access the basic scheduler, the basic scheduler. You can also access the Advanced Scheduler, but with limited capabilities. My Links, we all need to know about that. And again, all of the same items that are under My Links today will be under the My Links tab in the future. Notice that these are opening up new tabs, so you can have multiple tabs open. The Common Setup tab is something that we probably don't use a lot. We will be offering some report workshops and some scheduling workshops towards the end of March and into April. And at that time, you can learn about the event manager and the ability to actually schedule a report to run on a regular basis for you. The Workspaces drop-down, on the Workspaces drop-down, if I am a standard timekeeper, then I will have simply one item there, and that is the My Information. Click on that icon, and then it will open it up into your time card and so on. If, however, you are a scheduling timekeeper, you will have more items under the Workspaces. You will have daily staffing, scheduling, and also the My Information. As I mentioned, the Genies do not change, and you can see that there's very little difference here. The show and the time period have gone into a horizontal view instead of being stacked vertically. You also gain a maximize button, which is up here at the top. And you also have a new back button. The back button probably is not as handy as most people would hope it would be, simply because in this new view of Kronos, when you click the back button, it will typically take you back to a Genie list or that list that's in that widget. It does not necessarily take you simply back one click. We also have our Reconcile Timecard Genie here. We've brought that up on purpose because we do want to draw attention to the fact that this is the best place to be approving time cards because it has the all paid hours column. This is the only place that you will see all paid hours to see a list of all your people and the number of hours they are truly being paid for that time period. If you are in the habit of getting a list of employees and you double click a name and then you look at that employee's time card and you go back to your list and you double click another name and you repeat that process, you probably are going to get out of the habit of that simply because that back button does not function as it did before. If you are one of those folks, you probably want to adapt a different way of getting to those time cards, and that would be to get a list of your time cards and then highlight all of the names that you think you might want, and then use this time card link here at the top left, and then it will give you the ability to simply page through all those time cards or use the drop down to navigate directly to an employee. And I'll illustrate that in our demonstration today. So again, when I'm thinking about approving those time cards, it can of course be done from the time card itself, but the key here is again to look at the all paid hours or all hours paid. It's very important to do so. In the new world, we will have more placeholders that will come into play, and so being able to really truly identify placeholders versus amounts that are going to be paid is going to be critical. If you look in the totals and schedules area, it's also a great way to know for sure if there is shift diff that is being paid, if there's overtime or comp time that is being paid, and if the person floats to other areas or has callback or any of those other items. It's very clearly broken out in the totals and schedules tab. Again, the Genies all work the same way that they have before, and you can export any of those to Excel. You can click any of the columns and sort. And the employee attributes is one that is very handy because it shows you the pay rules and the exact amount of those meal defaults. So Global Time Off Request, or GTOR, again, this is our key item. This is something that everybody is interested in, and this is that all leave requests and missed punch requests will be submitted and approved within Kronos. Once I have identified the date that I wish to take off as the employee, I have two choices. I'm either going to submit a missed punch request or a time off request. That request immediately sends an email notification, an Outlook email notification to my reports to manager, and the request itself routes over to the request manager queue. When we are submitting leave requests in the future, we need to be aware of the fact that Kronos is capable of looking at projected earnings and projected takings because Kronos understands on a future date I will have additional accruals. Kronos understands that if I say I want a day off in November, it can look and tell me how many accruals I have available at that time. It also understands projected takings or debits. If in the new system I submit a request for vacation to use all of the available vacation that I have as of November the 1st, it will commit that vacation and will not let me take those same hours next week when I have an emergency that arises. This committing or encumbering of those vacation hours occurs as soon as the manager or timekeeper clicks the approve button on that request. This is something that we probably also need to think about as departments, because if you have situations where this could be a problem or it could be confusing as to the commitment or encumbering of those hours into the future, then we have another item that can be used. Health Systems has been using this for almost 5 years now. It is a good vehicle to allow us to make a request into the future, approve the request without committing the actual accrual hours to that. That is called TOR, T-O-R, or time off request. It is a place code that is a placeholder. Okay, it is a pay code that is a placeholder. So instead of requesting SL or VA or VAU or whatever the situation might be, in my drop down for my request is TOR. If I submit a TOR request and it is approved, it is a placeholder that now appears on the schedule, which is behind the scenes in Kronos. A manager can look at that and see how many people have been approved for TOR for that time period. It can be approved. It is not encumbering my accruals. I do have to remember that when that time gets closer, as the employee, I must submit a real leave request, identifying the actual accruals, be that sick leave or vacation or whatever. TOR is a placeholder. It cannot be paid out. It's not drawing anything. I do not have an accrual bucket called TOR. So it's a great placeholder, but it is something we simply need to know the limitations of both of those avenues. Again, when I click the Submit button, the email notification goes to my manager, and this is my Reports to Manager as it is shown in PeopleSoft HCM. All timekeepers with access to that department in Kronos, however, do have the ability to approve any request that is sitting in the Request Manager queue. So this is something that departments really also need to address and find out what's the best way to handle that. If there are managers that are going to be out of the office and cannot approve it, do they give that access or that authority to a timekeeper or to someone else, another manager who may have access to that department? If it is a missed punch request, is the manager going to receive that email notification and then simply forward that email to the timekeeper with a note that it is approved and please proceed, which then gives the timekeeper the authority to click the approve button on that request in the request manager and continue the process to make those edits. So these are things that departments simply need to be aware of as they're going through this process. The notification goes to the reports to, but all timekeeper managers with access to that department do have the ability, and whether they have the authority is something that departments need to address. So I've gotten the notification and I log into Kronos and I see that there are some requests waiting, and so I'm going to either grab that blue bar or the gear and pop out and move that into the primary workspace. Again, I could use the maximize button to also make that bigger. When we are looking at the request, you'll notice at the top of that page that we've got some additional filters, and those additional filters give us the ability to look at different time periods. That is probably something you need to be very aware of because the default is current schedule period. If someone has submitted a request for a time in the future, you're going to need to change that period. If they are submitting it for a previous pay period, and this is pay Monday, then again, you're going to want to be aware of changing that. I mentioned that this is a list for all home. If you do already have those personal queries or personal hyperfinds that are set up that allow you to look at Department 1, 2, 3, separate from Department 4, 5, 6, or something of that nature in your show dropdown, you will have the ability to use those here as well. If you do have multiple departments and you do not have those personal hyperfinds or queries set up, you might want to contact payroll or send an email to our admin systems mailbox, and we'll forward that on to help you get those built. The default view is also submitted. It's showing everything that is waiting for me that needs to have some action taken. But there are several different statuses. After you've been working in the GTOR request module for a while, you might need to locate a request that's already been processed. The nice thing about this is you can select multiple statuses. So you could ask Kronos to show you both things that have been approved and pending, or things that are pending and refused, or something of that nature. I can refuse a request. Once a request has been submitted, both the manager and the employee have the ability to take action on it and request it to reject it, or in the case of the employee, if it has not been acted upon yet, they can retract it. Okay. It is a very polite system, and every time any action is taken upon that request, it will send an email appropriately. I can click on the details for it, and the details will give me all of the information, including any comments that the employee has placed on it. When you click the approve or the refuse or the pending, you are not immediately clearing that item off your list. The approve button brings up the item with all of the details for it. Again, another chance to review it before you actually click the approve button that is within that request view, in that detail view. Once I click the approve button on a leave request, it is seamless. It flows immediately to the scheduler sitting behind the scenes and then to the time card. So it is seamless. If the employee puts in that the start time of that sick leave is at 1 p.m. for 4 hours, that's what immediately writes through that process to the time card. So this is one of the big advantages, one of the streamlined features. Again, we're not doing all this dual entry that we are currently doing with these 12 different leave request systems. Even after I've approved it, if something happens, maybe I've requested too much leave. In the case of leave that people submit for a doctor's appointment or a day off, and they might have had to flex some of that time out, stuff happens. If they need to amend that leave form, there are two choices. The manager could cancel it, or of course the employee could retract it, and then resubmit for the correct number of hours. However, there is another option that again streamlines the process. If I submit a leave request for 2 hours of sick leave for a doctor's appointment, which ends up only taking an hour, if I, on the original request, include an HR-approved statement, which in essence says, or bring me up to my assigned work hours, of course the phrase is very specific and it's a little bit longer, but in essence, I'm stating you may reduce the hours as appropriate to bring me to my assigned work hours. This streamlines the process again. Now the timekeeper has been given authority by the employee to change the number of hours on that leave request. They will do that behind the scenes on that schedule piece, and then it flows to the time card. We will have more information about how to do that on the My Training page as we go forward. We're going to be putting a lot of resources out on the My Training page. We'll also cover that in our hands-on workshops. To refuse a request, again, we can refuse that item. I'm going to find it in the list if it's already been approved or if it's still in the submitted status. This is just one more of the items that I could do, a way that I could act upon that request. There are comments, they are in the drop-down, and there are notes. The notes are only available if you put a comment. We have always in the past disabled the notes feature. We've done that because we were very cautious as to what timekeepers and managers might put in those notes. Since we cannot disable that feature this time, we must encourage you to please just put the facts. And we must discourage you from putting any of those heartfelt, candid comments in the notes section. This is a legal document and it is time and attendance, and so we need to be very cautious of any notes that we put in there, that they must be factual items. So a missed punch is a little bit more complicated simply because there is a second step to it. We have two examples here. The first example is, again, an employee who failed to clock in the morning at the beginning of their 8 to 5 shift. So when they clocked out that day, the 5 p.m. slid into the first available square, and hopefully the email or the employee notices this and immediately goes in and submits a request. So they're going to submit the request for a missed punch, and when they do so, it's going to flow to the request manager queue. I'm going to identify the correct item. And if I already know that I'm going to approve it, I could shortcut, or if I want to look at the details, I want to look in there and see what the employee has stated. The employee must put the start time as the missed punch. Okay, so this is different from the leave form. The leave form is always going to be what time does the leave begin. If I'm an 8 to 5 employee and I'm submitting a leave request for the entire day, the start time is 8 a.m. If I'm going home at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, the start time of my leave is 3 p.m. in the afternoon. But a missed punch, the start time is whatever that missed punch time is. And the duration or the length is 0. This is very important. It must be entered as 0. It was not something that could be hard-coded into the system, but it is something with our process that we need the employees to always submit the length on a missed punch as 0. And we'll see why in just a moment. We're also encouraging employees to please put some comments down in the bottom. This is a new process for us, and if they will put some additional information and truly explain what they need us to do, then that will help us as we process these requests. When you click Approve, you will immediately see the missed punch placeholder right to the time card and the amount. And in this case, we are showing an example of where this was incorrectly added by the employee, and they put in 8 hours as an amount. They also put in 8 as the time that they forgot to clock, so that was correct. But we'll see where this is a problem. Now, this is where this request is once you click Approve. You can see the red box is still there, and the edit is incomplete. The second screenshot shows where this needs to be with the edit being entered onto that row. So as a timekeeper or manager or employee, I'm looking for a match. We've got the missed clock as a purple punch, and we need to see that that is a match somewhere else for that day. If I don't see a re-entry of that, if I don't see the match, then clearly the information has not been edited and entered onto the time card. Now, if the employee puts in 8 up here in the amount or the length or duration of that missed punch, what we're going to end up with when that is completed correctly by the timekeeper and we have our 8 to 5 transaction, we're going to see 16 hours for the day. That's why we are saying that it is so important for the employees to put the missed punch duration as 0. That's going to really help us identify the actual number of hours for that day. So again, we have a placeholder, and then the second step is that it must be edited onto that time card. Move the 5 p.m. over where it belongs and add the 8 a.m. punch. The method that you edit the time card, of course, is the same way that you would edit it now as far as right-clicking or inserting and so on. We have a second example, same situation in that the employee failed to clock first thing in the morning. They clocked out for lunch, they clocked back in from lunch, and then at the end of the day, they left. The problem that we see is that we've got this 12 o'clock and all the other subsequent punches have simply slid into the first available spot. The good thing here is that the 12 noon actually has a red outline box on it. That is able to signal to us that that is now a match to the employee's schedule. This is where that schedule piece comes in handy. Again, the schedule is in Kronos. It's not changing anything about how I actually do my day. And if I am flexing out or something of that nature, it's just a tool that sits in Kronos. But it does give us this nice feature that if it's not a match, it draws our attention to the actual item that is probably in the wrong spot. So we're looking at the time card. The employee has submitted an item. We're looking at that request. This time they have submitted it correctly for a length of 0, and they have clarified in the note section the issue. I forgot to clock in at 8 a.m. So once the timekeeper or the manager approve the item, it pops the placeholder to the time card, the purple punch. This time we can see it is entered as a 0 number of hours, which is going to make that day look better when it's completed. The red box is still there, so again in the second screenshot is where we see that this has been completed. The edit is now complete, where we have the 8 a.m., again, we're looking for a match. The 8 a.m. has been entered, and the other items have been moved over into the appropriate location. So again, the employee submits the missed request. The manager or timekeeper, whoever has been authorized, approves the request in the request manager, and then the manager or timekeeper, depending on how those duties work in your particular area, but someone must edit the time card. Again, both the manager and the timekeeper have access to approve these, but those are departmental processes that need to be identified as to how you use this streamlined process to your best benefit. FMLA pool leave and military leave. There is no change to how those cases are opened. You can still open an emergency case. All of those are the same way as they are today. Timekeeper managers still must enter those FML hours in the leave editor. And we will have a new FML option in the list of the pay codes that I can request. So we'll have, as the employee, I can request SL, SLU, VA, VAU. I can request TOR for my time off request, or I could request FML as the request that I have for using that family medical leave that I have on file. Now, you'll notice that all of the new cases do come through, and if you have a new case, it will pop with a new prefix of new, simply identifying that as a new case. When the employee submits that FML request, and we are trying to embrace the correct terminology of FML, it's been pointed out to us that we all say FMLA, but none of us is actually requesting the act and a ream of paper. We're all actually requesting the family medical leave itself. So we're trying to make sure that our terminology is correct. And so you'll see that as the item in the dropdown is FML. So once it is approved, it will flow to the time card. It is important that if this employee has multiple cases, the employee document in their comment section which case is being used, and also very important that the timekeeper manager make note of that. So when you go into the leave editor, you are selecting the appropriate case. We realize that it's all out of the FML hours that I have, but the specific case is important to identify that because there are reports that are done on those aspects. So you will still go into the leave editor. I've looked at the leave request. It's been approved, putting the case placeholder on the time card. And now I'm going to turn around and go into the leave editor. Enter the hours into that form just like we do currently. And then our LV sick or LV vacation, whatever that item is, will also appear on the card. And you see here, this is one of these situations that by necessity, it will have a placeholder with hours, and it will appear to double the hours. This is why you really need to get in the habit of looking at the all paid hours, either at Reconcile Time Card or in the totals and schedules area of that specific time card. That will help clarify the number of hours that are truly being paid and help clarify that that is a placeholder and the FML is not a true pay code. So in regards to the leave editor and FML and military leave and all of those items, we do have some reminders from the folks over in Employee Leave Management. First of all, the case is open for the duration that the healthcare provider has identified. If that is an intermittent case, it is very often for an entire year. I do not have enough FMLA to last the entire year. As timekeepers and managers, it is up to the department to watch that FML bucket and see if I'm running out. Kronos cannot monitor that bucket and is not going to identify that you are out of FML hours. That is something that the department must monitor and let the employee leave management folks know when I'm nearing the end of those hours. Kronos does know when the employee's accruals are exhausted, the true accruals, vacation, sick leave, and so on. But PeopleSoft HCM does not know. So again, it is the department's responsibility to be monitoring that bucket for the sick leave and the vacation and so on. And when the employee is out, if there is no expectation that they are going to be back right away, they are still out of accruals, we need to know what to do with the time card. that person must be put on LOA. That is a change of status in PeopleSoft HCM. This is typically not something that a timekeeper can do. If the timekeeper simply puts the LOA placeholder on the time card, it does nothing. You have not changed the status of that employee. It is decoration. It is important to understand that. The status has to be changed in PeopleSoft. Likewise, when the person returns, just because they have hours on their time card does not mean that they will be paid for them. If the employee is still in a status of LOA, PeopleSoft cannot generate a paycheck for them. On your accruals tab for that employee, there is actually an accruals profile. It is there today. I encourage you to look at that, get familiar with it. That accruals profile is feeding directly from PeopleSoft HCM, and it will update nightly, and you will see that accrual profile. For most of your folks, it will say benefits eligible. If you have some contract people, you have some PBLs, it would be a different accrual profile. And if you have someone who is on LOA, the accrual profile is LOA. And again, a reminder, if your employee does have multiple FML cases, please make sure and select the correct one. Also, if you have someone who is out the day preceding and the day following a holiday, the holiday itself must be entered into the leave editor as well. If that is a monthly employee, because the monthly holidays are already preloaded by payroll, it is critical that before you go into the leave editor, you remove the holiday from the time card, click Save, let that 8 hours of holiday go back into the holiday bucket. Now go into your leave editor and let it flow through correctly. Again, I mentioned that employees cannot submit a leave request on a time period that has already been signed off. If they attempt to do so, it will give them a red message that simply says that cannot be done. And this is when they will need to go out to the Employee Historical Edits Request form and fill out that request, send that to their manager for further processing. The reports, we do have some improvements to the reports. And again, if I want to get to the reports, it's just a quick link right there on that main timekeeping workspace. When I open the reports link, we do have a new maximize button. Again, that will be very handy. The really nice thing about this new feature is that it is where you click the report first, then you identify who you are doing that report on. So it's a much better process. It makes a lot more sense than the current world. So I'm going to select my report, then the people, then the time frame, and then you'll notice that all of the options that used to be hidden on the tab are now right there on that same page, making it much easier to process and identify the parameters of that report. If you are running a report that is an Excel version, and we do have some additional reports that will also be an Excel version this time, you no longer have to email it to yourself. You simply run the report and view the report. Much improved. If you are running a report on specific individuals, you would have your list of employees, select the individuals, right-click, access the reports menu, and then it will already identify previously selected employees and continue identifying the parameters for that report. So my information, again, this is where you would make your request. You need a day off. You're going to click on the Workspaces drop-down, click on the My Information icon, and that will open up onto your time card. So this is where you'll be reviewing your time card on a daily basis, looking at your accruals, and if you wish to take a day off, you've got additional widgets up here to your right. Again, the ability to edit your own time card is based upon your exempt or non-exempt status. If you are an exempt timekeeper, you have the ability to use that PC license to edit. If you are an hourly or non-exempt timekeeper, you have the access, but you do not have permission to use the edit feature on your own time card. So if I need to make a request, I'm going to look at my widgets on the right-hand side, and I'm simply going to drag one of those or use the gear and pop out to bring it into the primary workspace. If you do access the calendar, it's got a lot of little icons there that weren't entirely clear, so we've given you just a little bit of a cheat sheet if you're using the calendar, and it will identify what those different icons would be used for. The smartphone app is coming soon. We are very excited about this. We've already begun testing it. We don't know if it will be ready for the March 18th go live, but we have begun testing it already. It's great functionality. You can do anything on the app that you could do on your computer. Clearly the view is much smaller, so you probably don't want to do a lot of checking of time cards in depth on your app, but it is a great place to be able to submit a request, approve a request, and do some monitoring of items. We don't also have any information yet as to who gets the app, whether it's rolled out to every single employee or if there are any parameters about that. If I make do an action from my app, it writes to the audit trail clearly, identifying it as something that was generated from the app. So recommendations and tips. The sign out moved. It was in the top right. Now it's going to be over on the left. If you are seeing too many people, you've got a huge all home, you've got multiple departments, there are these personal queries or personal hyperfinds that can be created for you. If that's something that you are interested in finding out more, just shoot us an email or contact your payroll processor. The basic scheduler, again, there's a lot of additional functionality that will be handy in the new world. It does not change anything about how your people work. It simply says we're going to document our expectation, our routine expectation, what's the norm. We know that there is the potential for Java errors, and we've been working closely with the folks in IS that handle that type of thing, actually for several weeks, and they believe that they have a very good plan in place and that we will be able to seamlessly pull off the old Java and push the new Java during that upgrade. As soon as you touch your computer the next day after the upgrade, it will happen seamlessly to about 80 to 90% of the computers, and we think that's a pretty good number. If you do happen to be one of the unlucky few that are in that 10 to 20% number, then yes, you might get one of these errors and you would want to contact the help desk. If you happen to have a computer which is very, very old and it is still using Windows XP, obviously you need a refresh of that computer and you want to encourage your department to follow up with the refresh. If there is some reason that you cannot get a refresh of that machine in time, then you will find that you are having constant problems with XP and the new version of Java. It will be very frustrating to you, and your best bet in that situation is to actually utilize My Citrix to have a kind of a tunnel view right straight down to the current version of. So if you have any questions about that, if you still got XP, or if you see an error, do contact the help desk. So we've got the help desk contact information here. If you do have a true payroll issue, of course, contact your payroll processor. But please do not contact your payroll processor because you can't figure out what to click on. We are hoping that you will keep this handout that you downloaded off from the web page, and that you will look at the materials that are loaded on the My Training page. We are rolling out additional information daily that we're putting on the page for you. And look at those items, try to hopefully resolve your question. And if you do have any other questions about it, please don't hesitate to shoot us an email. But do remember your payroll processor does not have the very same view that you have. They have a processing view. So very often when we're trying to explain to them what you see and where it's located on your page, they do not have that same view. So they're trying to envision what your issue is. We are going to be having some hands-on computer lab classes for timekeepers and managers that wish to have that experience. We are not doing any more teleconferences per se because we are launching the YouTube video. And so hopefully you can share this information with folks as you watch this video. Then you will let other people know that it is available to them. We have the employee video as well as the Timekeeper Manager video. So our timeline, and we do realize that this is going live the week of spring break, which is causing some concern. Technically, all leave requests for March 14th and beyond should be entered into the new G-Tour. Okay. If you have people that are going to be gone on spring break and that leave request has already been approved, hopefully when they return from spring break, then they will put that request in as soon as they return to work, which will be week 2 of the biweekly pay period. The system will come down on Wednesday, March the 18th at approximately 8 a.m. Again, we will have more information with detailed times on that as we get closer. The system is going down on Wednesday because we need to process payroll. That is the end of that time period. So Monday is Pay Monday. Tuesday it's being processed and sent over to PeopleSoft HCM. And then Wednesday morning we will take the system down. We are hoping by taking it down at 8 a.m. or maybe a minute or two after that, that will give everyone time to get clocked into the system in the morning. And then our goal is to have the system back up within 8 hours, and people would then be able to use the new teletime system to log out at the end of the day. We are officially giving ourselves 24 hours. Again, we've been practicing that transition. There's a lot of things that need to be validated before we release the system to you. So officially right now we're giving ourselves 24 hours, but we'll get a better timeline on that as we get closer. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email those to the admin systems mailbox that was on the previous slides. And at this time, we'll go ahead and do our demo of the system. Okay, so we've logged in as an employee, and as you can see, this view is pretty much the same as employees will see right now. If you are a scheduling employee, you will, of course, see some additional items in the My Information section. The only thing that we're changing about this with the upgrade for the employees is we're adding My Requests. Now again, we do want to encourage employees to be looking at My Time Card every day. And so we'll take a look at the time card, and of course this is where it touches Java and has to go find the Java pieces, so it does sometimes take just a minute to load the time card. And I always feel better if I make swirls or figure eights to pass the time. There we go, there's our time card. And I'm going to move directly to the previous pay period because this has got a very busy time card. This is the time card that we've been using for all of our demos during the past week. And what I'd like you to notice is the complexity that can occur if you've got someone who's doing a lot of requests, a lot of missed punches, and also how this could look to the timekeepers who are trying to do some problem solving if items are being approved and the timekeeper does not know that they're approved on the missed punch. So this is something that timekeepers and managers, departments really just need to be aware of. The streamlined processes are good, but it's designed as a single touch. The request comes through, one person approves it, that person does any further editing, is how it's designed in a streamlined approach. So when we're purposely touching this card multiple times and touching the request multiple times, we're kind of defeating the purpose of that streamlined ability. So looking at this time card, we've got our first clock of the time period, 6:45 to 7:14 p. That looks good. Also notice that on day 2, on Sunday, this person has clocked in the morning, but then we've got 2 purple punches here, okay? They evidently had a doctor's appointment of some sort that was going on, so they placed a request for 2 hours beginning at 5:15, but they evidently dashed out the door forgetting to clock, and so they submitted a request for a missed punch at 5:15 also, okay? Because this person is on a schedule, you'll notice that it is identifying that with a red outline box. It's bouncing up against the schedule and showing that as something that's not exactly as expected, and it says that is an early out based upon the schedule. Okay, so this looks good. Day 2 looks complete. Then we move on down to Wednesday, and when we look at Wednesday, we've got something similar. They've got a sick leave request, again for the 2 hours beginning at 5:15. This time they apparently did clock correctly, and there's no missed punch indicated, and the day looks good. Now on Thursday, Kronos is flagging that, as you see, with a red outline box on Thursday. And that's because there are currently no hours reflected for this day in the shift or daily column. And if we were to look at the person's schedule, you would see that there was an expectation that they worked that day. Now currently they have a missed punch that was approved for 6:45 a.m. The problem here is that there has been no further edit made to the time card. We also don't know if maybe the request contained missed punch for the afternoon or the evening as well. This is one of the things that, again, departments are going to have to think about. If you have someone who attends an off-site conference, that is a missed punch. If they are going to submit that request for the missed punch, then do you wish to have one request for the whole day, and they identify the first one, and in the comments they identify the further details about the out punch and the lunch and so on? Or do you wish to have that individual submit 2 separate requests, one for the in punch and one for the out punch? Those are items that the departments are going to have to wrestle with. So in this case, the employee has submitted the request for 6:45A. I don't know what else is going on. If I'm the employee looking at this, I am very concerned because there's no further entries to the time card. There's nothing more the employee can do at this stage. They need to find out what's going on. Friday is an example where the employee did not clock in or out, and you can see both missed punch requests. Again, so we've got 2 different ways that this could be done. We can see that the timekeeper or manager has made the entries here. We've got our match for 7:30 a.m. and the match for 7:10 p.m. So this day looks good as well. So you see the kinds of things that we're looking for. If there's a lot of activity with requests, you're going to see a lot of purple punches. The nice thing about the missed punch is that it is a placeholder, and it is something that you can run a report on later on. So it's a lot easier to run that report and identify how many missed punches or incorrect punches, because that would be viewed as the same thing. How many of those does this employee have? Also notice on the accruals profile, want to point out that on the accruals profile, it has this benefits eligible. That's something timekeepers and employees should be looking at if there is a leave of absence situation, to make sure that that is correct. So as the employee, I'm a little bit concerned about this item that has not been edited. So I want to double check and find out on 2/19, did I do something wrong? So I'm going to go back home, look at my menu, and pick My Requests. And again, as timekeepers, your My Information, My Request works exactly the same way. So I want to find the day in question, so I'm simply going to click back in time using my arrows. And what I see here is that I've got 2 missed punch requests. Okay, one has been submitted and hasn't gone anywhere as far as my manager taking action. I submitted it, I did what I was supposed to. The other one has been approved, so it popped to the time card. But this is a problem for the employee, and it's something that managers and timekeepers really need to be on top of, because the employee is very anxious, obviously, to know that that time card is correct. And we know that in some cases the employee is going to be tempted to resubmit that request, thinking that perhaps they have done something wrong and it's hung somewhere, and that's why. If it says submitted, it is on the timekeeper manager side. It is sitting in that queue, waiting for action. The one that was approved needs to be entered and edited on that time card. There's nothing further the employee can do. If the employee wants to come down and verify the details of what they requested, they can come down here and look at those items in detail. And we can see the 2 requests were made, but only one of them has been acted upon. So prompt attention to these requests is going to be important. You can see on the request calendar from the employee view, and again, you will have that view as well under My Information. You can see that we've got our 12A to 12P. That is just a Kronos formality. This is that clearly we are available 24/7. You'll also notice that if this person does have a schedule, it would be identified on top of that. This person does not. We can see the status of the request, and on the request calendar, it actually distinguishes between a GTOR, which is leave request. So anytime you see GTOR here, that means specifically leave, or an MP for missed punch. It is all in GTOR, but we see it reflected separately so that we can clearly identify on the calendar. Okay. So at this point, the employee for the 19th simply needs to track down the manager and the timekeeper and give him a little nudge and go, please get this on my time card. I am concerned. So I'm going to log out, and now I'm going to go in as the manager, and it is a separate login. Okay, and notice this timekeeper or manager currently has 5 time off requests. You can click and drag, but this is a bit tedious, dragging it up into the right place, but there's all my items. Notice that when I do that, all my genies are down here below, and I can navigate directly to one of those. If I want my genies back up here in the main area, I simply click the little refresh button, and they reappear. I mentioned that there's another way to get the request manager over into the active workspace, and that's to click this little gear and pop out. Much more instantaneous, much easier for most of us to accomplish. We've got our maximize button, so I'm going to maximize that view so that I can see more of my request, get a better view here. And I've got an awful lot of stuff that's waiting for me. But when you look in this list, notice that you do not see anything for the 19th. That's because these are all requests for the current schedule period. If I'm looking for the 19th, I'm going to need to pick a time frame that will show me requests for the 19th. Okay, so here's my item. It is from that employee to fix the 19th. It's a missed punch. They've nudged me, so I know what it's for, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this item, and I'm going to click the Approve button. I can look at the information in here, I can read the comments that they've put, and I don't see any reason to put a comment, so I'm simply going to click Approve. It falls off the list because now it's changed status. If I wanted to go find it, I could look in my Approved items. Okay. Now, I am curious. I want to see what that looks like on the time card. And remember, it's a missed punch. It still requires editing. So I'm going to minimize my item so that I can see my genies. And this is just one person I want to get to, so I'm going to use my quick find. And again, it has to load those pieces of Java to go find that list. Okay, and I'm going to type in demo. I have 2 employees by the name of demo. And again, an easy way I mentioned during the PowerPoint is I'm going to click and highlight the employees in question, click the word time card, and of course I probably want to maximize as well. I'm going to wait till it loads. I'm going to maximize. And now I have the ability to page through or use the drop down and get to the specific employee. So it's a much more efficient way to get those time cards as well, much more efficient than double clicking, look at one, back to the list, double click, and so on. And again, with the new functionality of the back button, this is going to be your best approach. So that was a request for demo employee number 2. And go to that previous pay period. And on the 19th, notice now that we have both of those items on the time card. but there is nothing loaded for this day. I have to go in and edit the time card. So I'm going to insert a row, and I'm going to say that start time, I'm looking right at it, the start time was 6:45 A. I'm going to go into my out column, and I'm looking at the item right here. I'm going to make a match, 7:10 P, actions, calculate totals. And now that day is completed. So the manner that you edit, of course, does not change. You still have access to make any edit to that time card that you ever have. But now I've got these items that are giving me those clues along the way. If there was something that I also needed to note in that employee comment, then probably I'd want to right-click or jot some notes so that I'm entering it appropriately. But this does make it easier. The employee's telling us what needs to be done, and I'm taking action on it. The leave populates seamlessly. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. I like that entry. It makes sense. I'd like to make a request for myself. I'm going to bring that down. I want to go to My Workspaces, My Information, and here's all of my requests and my time card. Okay. Again, if I am an exempt employee and my department has said, yes, we want you to edit your own time card, we're not going to do that pay to schedule yet, I will have the ability to edit directly to my time card. And depending on my meal break, and I can always rest my name directly there, and it says I have a no meal, so I'm going to record 8. Actions, calculate totals, maximize so I can see that entry, and save. Now that I've got my time in, I want to make a request, gear, and pop out. And now the My Request window, just like the employee's view, looks exactly the same, and I would have these items. I want to take a day off next week. I'm going to click on that day. And if I want to take multiple days, I just pick the consecutive days. They do have to be consecutive. If you want to deselect it, just click on it again. Just want to take the 2 days. I'm going to come down here to the left and say what kind of request. This is a time off request. It brings it into the form down below. The default, again, is vacation, so if it's some other kind of time, you need to specify. The duration is always the duration is always hours, and the start time should be the beginning of my shift. At the beginning of my shift is 7:30 in the morning. That's what I'm going to put. If my shift begins at 8, or whatever the beginning of that leave time is what we're entering. Again, this is based upon the number of days for the length. I do not want to put in there 40 hours for the entire week because that would try to put 40 hours on every single day. So the length is always per day. And I need to come over here and double check. My accruals are right there. They're right there. And you can see in this example, this is a probationary employee. They have not completed their 6 months. We can see it in the parentheses. The nice thing is that employees can now see this as well. I do have some sick leave available. So if this was appropriate to be sick leave, that request would go through. Oops. You do want to make sure, and employees need to be aware of the fact, and we do make sure that we address this in the employee presentations, that if the employee submits it as SLU and it really was if the employee submits it as SL and it should have been SLU, then that is up to the manager to reject that with a comment or a note, and the employee must resubmit it. That's going to be a little painful for the employees because now I have to resubmit the item. So hopefully it will get all of our folks in the habit of submitting it correctly. If it's supposed to be SLU, do it right the first time. It cannot be changed by the employee and just edited. It has to be resubmitted. So if it was SL, and I really only needed 2 hours, I didn't realize we could use sick leave for doctor's appointments. So I'm going to put that in for 2 hours. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say I have a doctor's appointment. And again, if my department has embraced it, I'm going to put that comment that says something to the effect, and I'm going to go find the proper comment. I'm not just going to make one up. This is an HR approved statement, and it will be out on the My Training page by the end of this week. So by the time you're watching this video, then it would be also posted on the My Training page under the resources or references. And I'm going to put in that comment that says basically, or bring me up to my assigned work hours. Something, we're going to use that proper statement. If I put that statement on my request and it only takes me an hour and a half at the doctor's, I've now given my Timekeeper manager authority to reduce this leave request on that schedule piece that then feeds to the time card. It does have to be changed on the scheduler piece, and so again, we're going to be providing that information on the My Training page and in the training hands-on sessions on how to accomplish that. But a purple punch cannot be modified directly on the time card. I'm going to click the Submit button, and now this is going to route to my manager. Okay? Now, again, the irony, as a timekeeper, you will see the request. Again, it would be inappropriate for a timekeeper to be processing their own requests. Okay, but you would see it because it's part of the same department. I'm going to move it to the correct time period, and I would see the new request come through. All right, so again, under the globe, we've got some items here. The My Links is something that, of course, you will be wanting to use. The Kronos to HCM error report is still there. We encourage everyone to look at that periodically. We've got our reports link. We can go back and forth between tabs. And we've got our Genies, and anytime we want the Genies back in the primary area, we just click the little refresh button. Okay. Well, that concludes our demonstration and our presentation. So I hope it has been helpful to you. Again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to shoot us an email to the admin systems box that is listed on the back of your PowerPoint presentation. Thank you and have a good day.
UTMB Health, working together to work wonders.